So Germany has formally recognized the killings of Herero and Nama ethnic groups as a genocide. In fact, German soldiers, you'll remember, killed some 65,000 Herero and 10,000 Nama people between the years 1904 and 1908. And this was after a revolt against land seizures by colonialists. That history-making move comes 5 years after engagement and negotiations with the Namibian government. German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said just yesterday that Germany will support Namibia and the descendants of the victims with $1.3 billion for reconstruction and development, and has also asked for forgiveness for the crimes that were committed by German colonial rulers. Let's get your sense of how this is translating on the ground. Bring in our next guest, who's a Namibian-based journalist, that Shelleygan Petersen, joining us via our video link from the Namibian capital of Windhoek. Shelleygan, thanks for making time to chat to us. Greetings from Johannesburg. I wonder whether you can help us locate the significance of what Germany has said. To be more direct, does it go far enough?
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me, Ayanda. Essentially, what we've seen over the last 5 to 6 years is now 9 rounds of negotiations between Namibia and Germany. They both appointed special envoys to have a sort of two groups, delegations that can have the conversation. And with both of those envoys, especially here from Namibia, we had the chiefs from both the Nama group and the Herero group go with the delegation whenever the negotiation rounds are either here in Namibia or in Berlin in Germany. If we look at the 1.3 billion, if we translate it at the current currency, it's about 18.4 billion Namibian dollars. And what we've seen is not really anyone appreciating it or even being open to accept that offer. Although our government has said that they will consider it and they will take it to the communities. I mean, even the recognition of the genocide, that is a major win for Namibia, because that's essentially one of the three main requests if we look at that discussion that emanated from our parliament. Our parliament, one of our political parties put forward a motion to have these negotiations started. And instead of it being an issue of the affected communities going to Germany, they decided to rather have it on a national level.
Yeah.
And in terms of your question, whether it goes far, it doesn't seem like it is far enough for the affected communities. However, the acknowledgement of the genocide is what the communities wanted. But they said there are two more requests that the German counterparts need to fulfill before they can accept any sort of the whole process, the whole genocide in this retrospect.
You know, Shelleygan, I wonder whether I'm getting ahead of myself. It might be worth taking a step back before we move forward with our discussion. The years were 1904 and 1908. In your words, very briefly, describe for a South African audience what happened.
Yeah. So an executive order was sent out from the German head at the time, and said they want to sort of kill all of the Herero groups and the Nama groups. And they basically sort of managed to kill 80,000 Namas and Hereros. So the numbers have been varying as we get it. What Germany had told Namibia just recently as to the numbers that they have, at the time it was 80,000 Namas and 80,000 Hereros, but what we're hearing now, it's actually over 100,000 for both groups. So it's 100,000 Hereros, 100,000 Nama group. So what they wanted to do actually is wipe out completely the Herero and the Nama ethnic groups. And essentially, if you've seen photos or images, you'll see photos of the skulls that they still had in Germany that was only brought over to Namibia in the last 5 years, where they also wanted to study sort of the mind and the structure of the Nama and the Herero groups. And this is from the German side. The German scientists wanted to not just wipe out the the two ethnic groups, but also wanted to study the bone structure and study the mind of both the Herero and Nama groups.
Sure. It's typical colonial conquest and violence that I think will resonate with many in our country. And perhaps, as I say that, help us reflect on how specifically young people in the affected communities look at developments like this, because we know the intergenerational reflections will be very different.
Yeah. So what we've seen over the years is, before I get to the young people, is both of these groups decided they needed to start marrying within the group. They needed to start growing the Herero and the Nama group. So within the Herero, in fact, they've established something called Shiramwe. So it is where you can marry or date your cousin that's not your direct cousin. So within the Herero tradition, you have something called your brother and your sister. That's not just your sibling, but if it's your mother's sister's child or your father's sister's or brother's child, those are your brothers and sisters. But when you're cousins, you're like third or fourth cousins, then you become a Shiramwe, and then you can marry your Shiramwe, your far cousin, or because for them it was, they needed to grow the Herero community. And with the Namas, very similar traditions, but with them it wasn't as a Shiramwe. But for them it was also, we needed to grow our community. And the sentiments that we're getting from young Hereros and young Nama people is that they are so, within their tradition, they have a thing where they have to teach the elders need to teach the younger generation of the atrocities of 1904 to 1908. Firstly, secondly, they need to carry the tradition. So wherever they go, that it becomes sort of pure, and that it doesn't break and lose form, and it isn't mixed. But over the years, we've seen, more sort of modernization, and you do marry out of your culture for both sides. For young people, it's become such a thing of, we need to carry on, and we need to get what was lost back during those 4 years. We need to somehow, they don't know how to make up for it, but they can still feel the loss of their ancestors, and some of them are descendants of the victims. So they carry that pride of my culture, but also that the sadness of what had happened. Yeah. They very much are very aware of the situation.
Yeah, I wonder how the enclaves that are being created by, call it the strategy being taken by the Herero and Nama groups, are affecting how those communities interact with other communities in Namibia.
Yeah, so we've been seeing over the last few years a sort of not just ethnic lines being drawn, but sort of our tribe needs to rise above whatever has happened. So there are clear tribal lines within Namibia now. If you look at just in terms of looking for work, in terms of for land and farming and all these things, there's clear lines. So for the Nama and for the Hereros, how they interact with other people is quite, we can interact on a professional level, but you need to know that my ethnic group is my ethnic group. So with the Namas, for the Hereros, as I said earlier, it's quite, we need to marry within our ethnic group. If you do marry out, it's like sort of not really frowned upon, but you will get eyes and looks from your elders. How they interact with the others is that with the other ethnic groups is they try to always bring forth their culture and ensure that they leave a mark wherever they go. So the Namas are mostly located down south of Namibia, so in the Karas and Hartap regions. And if you look at that, they really try to bring the traditions forward wherever they come. Even if they come to Windhoek, which is the capital city, and you get a lot of mixture of the ethnic groups, they try to always, make sure that they leave their stamp, because years ago, because of the genocide, they were almost wiped out. So wherever they go, they try to leave their mark and ensure that they've exposed everyone to their culture.
Sure. So the $1.3 billion US dollars or 1.1 billion euros, depending which currency you're using, has now been put on the table as a gesture of sorrow, for lack of a better term, from Germany itself. Is there any clarity in the public domain about how that money will actually be dispersed to affected descendants of the victims who were killed all those years ago?
Yeah. Now, during the 9 rounds of negotiations, the talks it was no longer talks of reparations, it was talks of reconciliation and reconstruction. And that is essentially what the 1.1 billion euros will go to. So that will go to projects and infrastructure and just to make it a better life for the affected communities. So Germany said that they will not give individual compensation. They will not release money directly to the affected communities. They will rather want to give the money in terms of projects for infrastructure, projects to better the lives of the affected communities.
Shelleygan Petersen, thanks very much indeed for your time and for